Maybe you've been exploring Vardoran for quite a while, or perhaps you're a new player just now diving into V Rising. Regardless, there are plenty of subtle tricks and systems within the game that put you on a level playing field with more experienced players. Hey there friends, it's Codiak here, welcome back to Legacy Gaming. I went ahead and thoroughly picked Livid's brain, combined it with my own experience and knowledge, and after hundreds of hours feel we're ready to bring you our Wish I Knew Sooner video, PvP style. If you haven't checked out our first Wish I Knew Sooner video, there are tons of tips perfect for new players diving into the world of Vardoran. It'll also help you get your bearings in the world without spoiling too much of the game. In this video, we'll be going much deeper, focused on advanced techniques and combat tips, base building, and ways to really maximize certain systems within the game to help you gain an edge, regardless of what server you're playing on. That is, until those folks watch this video. Now, all joking aside, we've got a lot to talk about, so let's dive right in. Let's start with something on the simpler side. When selecting your potential base location, you'll most likely be building on some form of elevated terrain. This in and of itself makes your base more secure immediately, because you can generally funnel all attacks from your enemies into select locations. However, when you are just starting out, your priority after placing your castle heart should be to expand your borders immediately to block off any ramps. Don't make the silly mistake of just using a single gate at the entrance. You'll need to claim the territory to the sides of the gate as well and construct walls. The reason for this is things like horses and, more importantly, toad form. Players can simply position themselves against your gate and either jump off their horse and get to the sides of the gate, or utilize toad form to do the same thing with much more flexibility. You can also take this a step further by making sure to place stair structures on your ramp. If you weren't aware, stairs are actually border tiles, which might be why some players can't seem to figure out why they can't place them when they're maxed out on their territory claim. The advantages this brings is twofold. First, it extends your claim zone further out, preventing other players from sealing off your entrance and griefing you. Second, the stairs themselves allow you to place gates on them, letting you airlock your stairs and making the horse method completely useless. Toad form can still be effective, but it makes it much more difficult. You'll want to make sure all possible jump-up routes are closed off to your enemy, because don't forget, when jumping off a horse or using toad form, you can carry explosives, siege golem stones, and more, something bat form restricts you from doing. If it's possible to get past someone's outer defenses in order to set up your raid deeper in, you better believe players will take advantage of that. Let's expand on this a bit further by talking about the importance of fully claiming your territory. It might be tempting to leave a patch of territory unclaimed to act as a sort of pseudo-garden or location where resources respawn, but you'll leave yourself completely vulnerable to an endgame vampire power, bat form. The reason this is such a huge deal is because countless players leave doors to these sorts of areas wide open, and even place some of their most valuable rooms directly around these types of areas. With bat form, you can only land in unclaimed territory, and that means you can drop into the heart of a player's area and get a more accurate lay of the land for when you're ready to raid. Being able to look through someone's walls and see the content of their base is a feature in V Rising, and we don't really understand why. It's something we absolutely think the developers need to remove, because it really gives players an advantage they shouldn't have. For the time being, however, you can use this to your advantage to get up next to the various areas of a base and figure out your most optimal path to a player's juicy loot. Additionally, another thing we think the developers need to fix, but still remains a feature right now, is the ability to land on the little outcroppings of terrain, generally on the corners of claimed territory, allowing you to effectively map out the entire radius of a player's base. Lastly, and I'm begging you here, please do not build your base as one giant open area surrounded by walls. Not only are you missing out on the isolated room and matching floor bonuses, but if a player gets into your base with bat form when you're joining an already active server, you're just going to have a bad time. You should, at the very least, make sure your chests are all locked away in a sealed room to prevent this from happening early on. For as long as survival games have been around, we legitimately don't think there's been a better solution for strengthening a base against a raid than honeycombing. In short, this just means layering as many walls or doors between your base and the most important things further down the line. Now, if you did as we suggested and ensured enemies can't get past your entrance to start their raid, then you'll want to make sure at least the first third to first half of your base is honeycomb central. This will allow the back half of your base to remain largely spacious if you want, but honeycombing can also prove to be an effective method if you're trying to be as meta as possible. Additionally, something we've seen countless bases mess up is blocking off entrances with walls instead of doors. In V-Rising, for whatever reason, walls and doors have exactly the same HP and take the same amount of siege damage from siege golems and explosives. This makes it so that it really isn't beneficial to block off any of your ramps or entrances, because all it ends up doing is limiting your ability to flank raiders or even escape with valuable loot to another base. We also want to say that ideally you create very direct paths with your doors and honeycombing and lead your enemies into areas where different paths converge. This lets you set up servants and their coffins in these choke points to make sure enemies hit all 9 of them at once, rather than encountering them one by one in various areas of your base. Now, every single time we go on a raid, the first thing we prioritize is locating a base's coffins. Why exactly? Well, if you break the coffins first, the player or clan loses their ability to respawn in the base and will be forced to spawn at a waypoint in order to return to the fight. This is significant for several reasons. First off, most bases keep a couple chests near their coffins stocked with repair materials, health potions, and blood potions. That way, when you respawn, you can quickly repair your gear from the ludicrous durability damage you take from dying, grab some health potions, and slap on a 100% blood type to re-engage your enemies. If you do remove this option from a team, you really only need to beat them once before the favor swings extremely far in your team's direction, because you also now have access to all of those things yourself while they don't. Additionally, this makes them have to either bat form back into their own base if they're high enough tier, or try and get in through the entrances of their base, which by this point you should have made your way through and secured with your siege golem and explosives. It turns their choke points into yours, and that's really effective. A simple tip: when building your base, don't place all of your coffins in the same room or in an open room. You'll want to instead place each coffin in its own 1x2 room and section it off with a few airlocks. This ensures the cost to get into each coffin room is substantial and will likely eat up a sizable amount of explosives or siege golem time that most players don't want to expend. It'll also give you a much higher chance of being able to respawn and keep fighting with some of your clan before they can get to all of your coffins. Springboarding right off the coffin topic, let's tie that into your loot rooms as well. Notice I said loot rooms. While it may be convenient to make a large room at the back of your base with all of your chests, this is actually the worst way to protect your loot. Raiders will know exactly how to get to it, and once they do, you've handed them over everything that can help you potentially turn the fight. You should instead make several 1x rooms with at least 2 walls before your next one, all at the deepest locations in your territory, and surround them all with honeycomb walls. This makes sure golem AoE slams and explosives can't crack multiple rooms simultaneously. Also, if you are using the large chest, you'll be able to line only one side of the room with storage, but if you're using the smaller, large boxes, you can actually line both walls. At this point though, it's up to personal preference. This ensures no one singular raid will ever get to everything that you own, usually. It also allows you to keep your stockpile split, allowing you to get back on your feet, lock down the raid, and potentially retaliate. It also means you have resource dumps for every material in multiple locations, allowing you to design your crafting rooms with better efficiency. Lastly, make sure you're keeping your most valuable loot in your vampire lockbox. We've come across several bases that didn't even build one of these. In short, they aren't lootable unless the castle heart is destroyed, making them the perfect place to keep dark silver, gold ingots, siege stones, and much more. We always keep our stock with things like this to make sure we can always repair and immediately retaliate. There are several ways currently in V-Rising to beef up your base defenses, the first being the most obvious route of servants, so we wanted to go over that in depth. You'll want to make these servants out of both the highest level and highest blood purity you can find, because this influences both how survivable they are as well as how much damage or healing that they can output. Then you'll want to get them decked out in the highest possible endgame gear to maximize their gear score. The higher their gear, the more damage they do to both players and, more importantly, siege golems. A well-optimized bastion of servants can easily stop siege golems dead in their tracks, which is why we personally haven't been on the side of the general population calling for golem nerfs. Those things, if anything, need to be buffed, but that's a discussion for another day. In terms of servant composition, to best defend your base, we found the following to be ideal. 4 paladins. These are your frontline bruisers and will easily soak up a majority of the damage coming their way. Because of their AoE attacks and high damage, they'll consistently cause enemies to backpedal. 2 Light Weavers, these provide insane AoE and ranged harass, while being an absolute pain in the ass to hit when things are hectic with how often they jump around. Their damage is also terrifying when they're high enough level and blood purity. 2 Clerics, these are here to bolster and heal your Paladins and Light Weavers, making them a much more difficult target to address. They are also tanky themselves and become difficult to target when everything else is attacking your opponent. Lastly, the flex spot. You can either go with 1 priest for an additional source of healing and knockback totems that disrupt enemy positioning in tight corridors, or you can try and find a high-level thief to potentially surprise your enemies with random invisible incapacitates that make them sitting targets. You'll also want to make sure to optimize your servant's capability to defend by making your entrance routes funnel into a forward defense room. Keep your servant's coffins here and keep all doors on this room servant locked to prevent them from leaving and separating. By keeping them all together, it ensures raiders hit a cluster of 9 high-level servants, which by themselves can completely stop multiple siege golems and players, but throw you into the mix, fighting alongside them, and it's a game changer. Last up in the way of optimizing your base, let's talk about tombs. At first glance, most players, and we really do mean most, place these outside or randomly around their castle grounds to simply farm materials. What if we told you that you were using these entirely wrong and are actually one of the most potent base defenses you have at your disposal in the endgame? The units that make these so destructive are the Banshees, capable of fearing your opponents and doing insane amounts of burst damage while remaining pretty tanky themselves. What you're going to do is make sure you attach 1x2 rooms parallel to your main corridors, putting a servant lock on doors as one wall and a window with shutters on the second wall. Inside, you'll place 2 tombs against the far wall facing each other. Once you have the materials for Banshee production, load them up and leave the room. In the main corridor, these are attached to layered door after door. This makes it so explosives and golem attacks will do AoE damage to these walls and break at least one wall open as they're moving through. This ends up unleashing a whole horde of Banshees into the hallway that completely decimate golems and players alike, which is also why we servant lock our doors past this point, so the 2 forms of defenses don't actually end up fighting each other. In all the time we've played and servers we've played on, we can only count on one hand the times we've seen this tactic used when it should be meta-level defense for all clans. Alright, enough about base defense. With that out of the way, let's focus on improving your PvP skills now that you have peace of mind with your base layout. Spell canceling is something we're willing to bet most players weren't aware of, but it's probably the single most important combat tip you can master in V Rising. When casting a spell that isn't an instant cast, such as Chaos Volley, you can immediately hit your X key to cancel the animation and not use your cooldown. This baits your enemies into using their defensive skill or travel skill intended to avoid your damage skill and ends up leaving them defenseless for when you actually choose to engage them with that skill. It baits out counters, barriers, shields, dashes, and more, and always gives you a leg up in every single fight. Carry multiple weapons. Now I know what you're thinking here. With the repair cost for PvP in the game so ludicrous, why would I do that? Because multiple weapons is how every top tier PvP player actually plays the game and enables the strongest builds within V Rising. Let me quickly explain using the slasher and spear combo. When pairing weapons together, take a look at their Q and E abilities. More often than not, one of them will be severely better and more often used than the other. For slashers, your E lets you go invisible and incapacitates your enemy. For spears, your Q does a massive flurry of attacks that mini stuns with each hit. This enables you to dance around your opponent, disappear, stun them, and then follow up with a guaranteed burst of damage, all without ever using a single one of your spells. It's one of the best combos in the game, full stop, and there are other weapon combos that function in the same way. Additionally, you can circumvent your repair costs in a smart way here. For the weapons you're purely using for utility, like the slashers in this case, you can run them as basic iron weapons. You can simply swap them out for the stun, then swap back to your high tier spear for main combat. If you die, you still really only have to worry about the cost of your main weapon, while your utility ones are extremely cheap to repair, which is a pretty neat tip. We think in addition to mentioning something like the spear and slasher combo, we also want to highlight a few other potent options. Rather than doing more build guides, this should instead help you see how to effectively build a character that's set up for success through synergy rather than what does the most damage. Chaos Barrier and Chaos Volley is the first combo we want to touch on, both S-ranked skills in our ranking series that you should definitely check out. Barrier will not only prevent a hostile volley from hitting you, since most players run that skill, but it will also pull them in closer and deal an instance of Chaos Burn per attack reflected. Should your own Chaos Volley get reflected, you can swap immediately to the Barrier skill to reflect that reflection back at your opponent. It's hilariously effective. Frost Barrier and Frostbat is the go-to setup for Frost-based builds. It's basically the ultimate freeze combo. Play patiently and absorb enemy attacks with your Barrier to chill and slow your enemy, and follow that up with one of your Frostbat charges to guarantee a freeze. This then allows for a guaranteed burst of high damage from something like the Spear, Axes, or Reaper as a follow-up. Finally, utilizing the Incapacitate from Slashers or Axes in combination with Arctic Leap is a seriously deadly combo. Arctic Leap is an S tier ability, but only if you can land it. Because it's so telegraphed, opponents can dodge it quite easily when they see it coming. The hard stun setup from these weapons followed by this skill allow you to land Arctic Leap for big damage in a guaranteed freeze every time. This also puts a single opponent out of action for a massive 6 or 7 seconds, giving you or your team a favorable trade. Just remember to keep your travel skill off cooldown when you can to ensure you can always dodge an incoming counter Arctic Leap. I can't believe we need to mention this, but the amount of players we see trying to bloodmend constantly in PvP is ridiculous. You absolutely need to be carrying potions with you at all time, mainly the Blood Rose ones for healing. Every time you use Bloodmend, you're putting yourself on a timer in combat for running out of blood, while also eating into a precious resource that keeps your 100% blood buff running. Bloodmend should be your last resort when you run out of potions, since it takes the same amount of time to initiate and get 1 tick of Bloodmend as it does to drink an entire potion, with the added benefit of being able to move away to continue healing. In PvP, you need to use everything to your advantage, from cover and line of sight to animation canceling. Another resource too many players don't use is their animal forms to both engage and disengage from fights. Rat form allows you to slip away if you need to run and can break line of sight for long enough. Because your name tag doesn't appear when in rat form, you can easily hide beneath foliage and give players the slip in order to get out of combat and heal completely. Rats are also useful for stealthily approaching a raid in progress and even slipping into raids undetected. Wolf form is fantastic for fleeing from enemies or with rogue's blood, catching up with enemies on slower horses or in wolf form themselves. Finally, bear form in combination with your health potions allow you to heal twice as fast. Knowing when to use these forms to your advantage can completely swing a fight in your favor, so don't forget them. This last tip honestly comes with just playing the game more, but we can help steer you on the correct path. Learning the weaknesses each skill has can be vital in beating your opponent, since, don't forget, as long as your skill is off cooldown, you can swap it at any time. Barrier skills are strong against melee attacks and projectiles, but do absolutely nothing when hit with an AoE. Things like the Howling Reaper ability on the Reaper, or things like Purgatory and Aftershock completely bypass barriers and do full damage. Conversely, you'll ruin a spear user's day by making them Q your Chaos or Frost barriers, as each rapid thrust counts as an individual attack and as such deals an instance of damage. Line attack ultimates or telegraphed abilities like Arctic Leap or Frost Vortex only work well when a player's travel skill is down. Watching for these moments before casting a potent ability like this will be the difference between doing full damage or no damage at all. Lastly, save shield skills like Power Surge for right before an attack connects, or right after an attack with a dot effect connects. The shield will override your health, and the dot will only take from the shield, leaving your health pool mostly untouched. The name of the game in PvP is keeping your effective HP high so that your heals in combat can keep you topped off. And there you have it, advanced PvP tips for V-Rising that will help you keep up with the big dogs on any server. If this is your first time checking out our channel, welcome. We've already got a number of V-Rising videos covering just about any topic already live on the channel, so be sure to keep it right here if you're looking for more vampiric goodness in your feeds. If you enjoyed the video, you already know what to do. Hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. Wish I Knew Sooner is one of our biggest series here on the channel, and it takes dozens of hours to put together, so if you appreciate our work, we'd appreciate your support. We also invite you to join us on Discord. We've got a great community of over 20,000 members with a special section dedicated just for V-Rising, and even a private server that's completely open to the public, so if you're looking to join, check out the link below. Finally, if you like everything we're doing here on the channel and you want to support us even more, you can do so by becoming a member. For just a few bucks, you're helping Livid and I achieve our dreams of becoming full-time content creators. Check out the join button below to learn more. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.